Superman Returns came out in 2006. It was directed by Bryan Singer, the man who should have stuck around to direct X-Men 3: The Last Stand, but he didn't because he came to direct this movie, and you know what? That's another video. Either way, Superman Returns was Superman's big comeback to the big screen. I mean, we hadn't seen Superman in 20 years. We hadn't seen him since Superman 4 in the late 80s. This was our chance to see Superman revitalized in a modern day setting, or at least with modern day special effects. It's still an old school type of story. Apparently, it still takes place in the old Donnerverse of Superman films, and it kind of ignores the events of Superman 3 and 4. Let's be honest. They made the right call with that one. It stars Brandon Routh as Superman himself. It stars Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane. It stars some guy that I can't remember as Perry White. Kevin Spacey, brilliantly cast as Lex Luthor in this movie. Apparently at the end of Superman 2, when Superman flew towards the camera and said, "Hey, yeah, I'm Superman, adios," he was actually saying, "Peace!" to Earth, and he just took off, and I guess he left. So Superman Returns is about Superman coming back to Earth after 5 years. He apparently went off into space because he heard rumors that Krypton may have survived, or that there might be some kind of remnant of Krypton surviving. Spoiler alert, Krypton has not survived. It's gone. It's dead. He found that out, he came back to Earth, and it's been 5 years. So he comes back to Earth 5 years later, and pretty much everything is kind of the same. Lex Luthor is still being an evil dick, and for some strange reason, after all the crimes that Lex Luthor committed in the other movies, he's not like buried in a black hole at the bottom of Alcatraz, or at least in a hole underneath Alcatraz, somewhere close to hell with like armed guards and metal dogs and electric fences and a whole bunch of world-class security. Apparently, no, Lex Luthor can somehow get an appeal. Of course, the biggest plot line of this movie is that Lois is pissed at Superman, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, for the record, guys, I was so stupid excited to see this movie. I was 12 years old, I believe. I saw this in the summertime of 2006. I was so excited to see this movie. I've obviously been a huge Superman fan for my entire life. Everything I saw and paid attention to leading up to the release, everything looked great. Brandon Routh looked great as Superman. He looked just like Christopher Reeve, which I have a sneaking suspicion that's actually why he was cast in this movie as Superman. Everything was setting up for this movie to be the epic Superman, the return that we deserved, the epic Superman that we have been waiting for 20 years. And did we get that? Well, no, not really, not at all. Is this a bad movie? No, this is actually not a bad movie, guys. I cannot in good conscience sit up here in front of this camera, being honest with all of you guys, my viewers, my subscribers, or whoever the hell is watching this video, and tell you straight up that Superman Returns is a bad movie. It's not. It's not a bad movie. In fact, there's quite a bit to enjoy about this film. Having said that, when I walked out of the theater in 2006, it was one of the most disappointing experiences that I have ever had in the movies in my entire life, and I'm telling you that from my heart. This movie did have some things going for it. It's competently directed, it's competently acted. No one gives a bad performance in this thing.
Brandon Routh was fine as Superman, just fine. You could tell that he was doing a Christopher Reeve impression. I don't blame him for his performance in this movie. You could tell that Bryan Singer told him to do it, so it was okay.
The visual effects are not only better than they were in the 80s, obviously, because, you know, technology has advanced people. We've come a long way. I mean, Bryan Singer does a really good job at keeping things in camera, and the CGI and the special effects, they actually still kind of hold up today, and we're in 2017, so this is 11 years later, and the special effects still look decent. And what I did like about this movie is that there are a few subtle homages and references to the older Superman movies. For example, in the first Superman movie, you saw Superman when he first revealed himself to the world, he saved Lois Lane from a helicopter, something flying he has to save her from. Lois is wearing a yellow dress, and after he saves her and he flies away, she faints. In this movie, when Superman re-reveals himself to the world after being gone for 5 years, he once again has to save something that's flying. He has to save an airplane. Lois Lane isn't wearing yellow, I don't think, but when she does faint, and she faints again after he saves her, that yellow airplane safety slide thing slides out, and that's yellow, so I like that. That's kind of a subtle little homage to the first Superman movie. It felt just like Superman the movie, and that's an awesome thing to do. Other little things pop up during this movie, like Lex Luthor. He has another chick who's basically, she's modern day Miss Tasmaka! They have this really great dialogue going back and forth where Lex Luthor is like, "Hey, what did my father always used to tell me?" And she's like, "Get out." And it kind of reminded me just like that back and forth that Miss Tasmaka had with Lex Luthor back in the first Superman movie. As I mentioned, the airplane sequence from earlier was not only a really great homage, it's also one of the greatest action sequences in Superman film history. I'm not exaggerating. No, seriously, this thing is epic. This is one of my favorite things ever. Superman, I mean, the speed, the power, the ease with which he saved that airplane, even though he made it look a lot harder than it actually was. There was some great tension there. The music was great. The action was good. I mean, that is one of the best sequences of this movie, hands down. Another great sequence is when there's some criminal who's shooting machine guns or 50 caliber weapons at the police or whatever. They're doing a robbery or something. Superman comes in to save the day, and then the guy tries to shoot his 50 cal at Superman, and the bullets obviously are bouncing off because Superman is bulletproof. Spoiler. And then for some reason, the guy tries to shoot him in the face after the 50 cal doesn't work, but the bullet just bounces off of his eye. Again, it's iconic. You can't deny that. That's really all this movie has to offer. It has a few clever homages and it has a few moments of brilliance. The rest of the movie as a whole is packaged mediocrity, I'm sorry to say. One of the biggest issues I have with this film is that it doesn't even really feel like a Superman movie. It feels like Lois returns. And, oh, Superman's in the movie too. No, seriously, it's all about Lois. Almost everything in this movie is about Lois. In the 5 years the Superman has been gone, you find out a lot about Lois and how her life has been. Yeah, you find out that she's basically been pissed at Superman. She wrote an article. She won a Pulitzer for why the world doesn't need Superman. Moved on. She has a new boo, Cyclops from X-Men. Weird how that works. She also has a new son, and so you find out a lot about Lois. You don't spend actually that much time with Superman. In fact, most of this movie is just a dreary, boring, melancholy slog of a film where Superman is flying around feeling sad about not being able to be with Lois, and Lois is walking around feeling angry at Superman. You feel like that's the main point of the story, even though there should be more. And Lois, for basically 2 hours of this 2.5-hour runtime, is pissed at Superman, and you can tell that she still wants him. You can tell. As soon as he showed up with the airplane there, that pussy got wet. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the sound she was making. I know it's hard for you to accept. It happened. There are so many great directions that they could have gone with the story, but instead they just turned it into a soap opera, a 2.5-hour melancholic, depressing soap opera with brief commercials of awesomeness. Think about it, Superman's been gone for 5 years, okay? When he comes back to Earth, there could be a whole new host of problems for him to deal with. Not just Lois. I mean, it seems like everything in this movie was told through the prism of Lois is mad at Superman. How has the Earth responded to Superman being gone? Has the world adapted and evolved? You feel like the world hasn't really changed all that much. Are the police and special forces, how are they doing? How is crime doing? What about superheroes? Are there other superheroes that have popped up in Superman's absence? Are there other supervillains that have popped up in his absence? Maybe he has to deal with something new. Maybe the governments of the world go to Superman and they're just like, you know what? You kind of left us hanging there. What the hell happened, bruh? I don't know, I'm just saying there's a lot of interesting angles they could have taken with the Superman being gone 5 years and then coming back thing, but instead they used most of it to focus on Lois and her issues. I would be perfectly fine if all of the story angles that I just threw out there, if none of them worked or if they decided not to go in those directions. I'm perfectly fine. I'm not judging this movie based on what I wanted, but the problem is what we got instead just wasn't good enough for our first Superman movie in 20 years. They even bring Lex Luthor back. As I mentioned, Kevin Spacey is a great Lex Luthor. You can tell sometimes that Kevin Spacey is trying to do a Gene Hackman impression, but he shakes it off and he brings his own signature wit and charm and snark to the role, and that's really awesome. My problem is that they do the same exact thing with Lex Luthor in this film that they've done with Lex Luthor in previous movies. If you're gonna bring Lex Luthor back as a villain, at least do something new and interesting with him. Hell, put him in his war suit. Have Superman go a few rounds with him. Or have Lex Luthor recruiting other supervillains to take down Superman or something. Don't just have Lex Luthor once again wanting land and needing land and coming up with this diabolical plot to kill a whole bunch of people because he wants land. It's all about land. The only difference is in Superman the movie, he used missiles to kill a lot of people because he wanted land. In this movie, he uses kryptonite. Still have cool sequences sprinkled throughout here, like Superman flying around Metropolis and saving everybody from all these natural disasters that are popping up. Like there's a whole bunch of gas lines blowing, and then he has to save people that are falling. He has to pick up debris before it's about to hit people. He picks up the Daily Planet, which is really kind of symbolic now that I think about it, him holding the planet literally above his head. Also one sequence in this film where they do try to pay homage to Lois and her whole I spent the night with Superman thing from the first Superman the movie, you know, the one where Superman takes Lois and he flies around the world with her or whatever. He has the best line in the movie at this point, and this is like the one point in the movie where you feel like, okay, Superman has the entire world on his shoulders. It's one where he mentions, he's like, hey, you wrote an article that says that the world doesn't need a savior, but every day I hear people crying for one. It all leads to this big, huge, bloated finale where Superman has to pick up this big-ass continent full of kryptonite and push it softly into space. Now look, visually, does it look cool, Superman pushing a continent into space? Yeah, it looks cool, and it really demonstrates Superman's power. Is it worth sitting through the 2 hours and 20 minutes that it took to get there? No, not really. Not to mention we have to waste another 10 to 15 minutes of, is Superman dead? Is he not dead? When we know that Superman is not dead, because they're not going to bring Superman back for 20 years and kill him in the first movie. It just doesn't make sense. Then you've got this really weird scene at the end where Superman is talking to his kid. I guess it's his kid that he had with Lois. The kid is like half Kryptonian, half human. Somehow Superman knows this, and he like goes to the kid's room and starts having the whole, with great power comes great responsibility, except you'll be Superboy and I'm Superman, and hey, I'm your dad, but not really. That whole scene felt weird to me. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Are you just going to be like a half deadbeat? Is that what you're going to be a part-time deadbeat? Is that what's going on here? Are you just going to be there for the kids sometimes, but you're not going to be there full-time as his father or whatever? It's such a weird scene. I don't even know how to feel about it. Superman Returns is not a bad movie. It's not. I can watch this movie and get some enjoyment out of it. As a film, it's fine. It's competently directed and acted. It's got some really good sequences that stand out about it. As a Superman movie, it is a disappointment because the story, the pacing, and the way things all coalesced as a whole in this film just didn't really match the Superman that I was hoping we would be getting after everyone had to wait 20 years to see him. Superman Returns, I'm going to throw that in the Fortress of Solitude because it's average. Alright guys, so have you seen Superman Returns? Where do you rank it among your hierarchy of Superman films? Let me know. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace!